without further ado, I will introduce our panel here. So first, Marek. Marek, just to give a brief intro, he earned his PhD in computer engineering at the University of Manitoba, where he developed a data-driven, evidence-based decision support system for healthcare based on emerging AI. Marek also co-founded the Blockchain Research Lab at the School of Business. I'll let you do a more extensive intro once we get the rest of the people out here, but Marek is on the research side, and he's also involved in some startups. He will be able to bring a great perspective here to this panel. Second, we have Shagufta Sayani. Shagufta is a blockchain solutions architect at Ernst & Young. I've had the pleasure to work with Shagufta in the past. She's fantastic. The whole team at Ernst & Young is fantastic. They're doing great things, and they truly understand what blockchain technologies can do, and they're really pushing the dial. So very happy to have Shagufta here as well today. And last but not least, Mr. Mark Bowman, counsel at Fasken. Mark has, I think it's been a year that you've been running your own business. So Mark works a lot with smart contracts and for legal, and trying to make smart contracts and the use of smart contracts more widely available. So I want to thank all of you three for coming in here today, and looking forward to this discussion. So yeah, maybe I gave a brief intro, but if you guys want to talk about some of the stuff you've been working on and over the past year or over the past little while, just to give more context to the folks here, just how involved you all are in the space, and maybe I'll ask Marek to kick it off.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. So I've got into this blockchain space, certainly after some, in crypto Twitter they call them the OGs. I'm not one of those folks, but I've been in the space a little bit longer than some. I've watched it go from me going out and pitching new ideas to business leaders, government leaders, and so forth, and then you have to kind of explain where blockchain comes from and where it's in use. And at the time, Ethereum wasn't there yet, right? Bitcoin is really the only one you can really point to at the time. And they would say, "Isn't that used to buy drugs on the internet?" And so all of a sudden, what you were doing was defending that what you're doing isn't selling drugs on the internet. So I think that we've come, a super long way, in the past couple of years. I think that, I've been lucky to get involved with a couple of interesting projects lately. They're sort of both around securitized asset tokens. So, security tokens are, basically legit ways, regulatorily compliant ways of, issuing these tokens. That's all I want to say about those for now. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Matthew, am I audible?
I think I can hear you now. I think you're good, yeah.
So I got into the space about 2 years ago while I was working with JP Morgan. And at the time, I was a very focused enterprise developer with Java, J2E, working with technologies like EJBs and Springs. And they're like, if you don't know what they are, EJB is like dinosaur of enterprise technology. So that was the kind of legacy application that I was working with, written 15 years ago. And working in the supply chain financing, the trade financing team, we had a strategic direction from the top management that we should explore blockchain, and that's when I was like, what is it? And that's the time when I got to look into it, and there was no turning back for me. I instantly realized that this is transformative, and it is going to have a great impact on how we do business today. So for them, we explored a lot of use cases in the finance, and I've been doing a lot of personal projects as well. So I've done invoice factoring, trade financing, and identity systems. I've been doing a lot of personal projects as well ever since I got into it. And then last year when I joined EY, that was the true transformation for me in my career in the blockchain space, because I got to work on multiple different domains, multiple business lines, and to design and architect and develop solutions which were making real impact on real businesses, and they were way beyond POCs. They were production grade applications. They were client applications, which was being used and supporting live transactions. So right now, I'm working on a Microsoft project. We're building a royalties management solution for them using blockchain. And we are also working on setting up a technology framework to be able to do private transactions on public Ethereum mainnet. So that privacy has always been a concern for enterprises to take to adopt blockchain in their production environment. And we're trying to solve that using zero knowledge proofs. So that's also something that I'm exploring for now.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Mark Bowman. I'm a lawyer at Fasken. I'm a non-traditional lawyer, being that in my current role right now, I spend most of my time developing software. Most of my time is spent focusing on artificial intelligence solutions that we use inside the firm to help make ourselves more efficient and to add quality to what we do. But I spend a lot of time on smart contracts, and the reason why I'm very grateful to be part of this panel is that I'm here to talk about our kind of experience trying to monetize smart contracts, the issues that we've seen in using them in traditional legal setting, and kind of what I'd like to see in the environment as we go forward. Apart from my experience with smart contracts, as Jeff had mentioned in his original introduction, I've been part of the Fasken blockchain task force for about 2 to 3 years. So we've helped a lot of clients over that period of time go from concept to ICO to product, and that's kind of the general high-level view of my experience with Bitcoin and public ledger systems.
Thanks, guys. So I guess to start this off, and we're not going to touch on any regulation concerns or issues today. We're not even going to talk so much about the technology, just what is outside of that is, that we're facing challenges with and working with business leaders with to try to get stuff productionized. So, and what I want us to do here is just, we'll have a discussion here on the panel today. I think we could come up with some interesting conversation, bouncing ideas between each other. So I think that the first area that we could potentially explore is the education side of things. So I think, it's still, the technology we're working with is still so new and people are still trying to wrap their heads around this stuff. How different do you guys feel the whole onboarding a client in education is today compared to last year, and maybe what are some of the challenges and approaches that you guys take to actually get past that? Who wants to take it first?
I'll start. I think over the past, say, 2 years, the level of education in the public has grown immensely. I can remember clients coming in 2 years ago not being able to really, they were able to explain the benefit of what they wanted to build, but whether it was investors or potential customers, there was a hesitancy. And I think through events like this, we've seen a lot of really great change in regards to people that, I mean, I work at a law firm that has a lot of extremely old lawyers in it, and yet I could probably walk into almost any office and have a conversation about the subject and not get that blank stare saying, hey, wait, isn't this how you buy drugs, or, et cetera, et cetera. So I think education has come a long way, and I think the time is right. That slide that you originally had showing where adoption was, I think that's spot on. I think now it's up to the developers to really show killer solutions to really push the technology forward.
Right. I'd agree to that. I mean, last year we would start off our conversation that Bitcoin is not the same as blockchain. So that was the classic starting of any conversations with any of the clients. And the second one being block space chain is not equal to blockchain. So we are far beyond that. We have come very far ahead where our clients or the enterprises understand what blockchain is. The challenge that they face is realizing the benefits that they can extract by adopting this technology. So last year, where it was more blockchain 101, this year I see myself doing a lot of design thinking workshops with the clients, identifying the right use cases and the right problems to solve.
So I would echo that we've come quite far. I mean, folks maybe about a year ago were asking me, Merrick, where are the POCs, right? Where are the actual use cases, right? And so we were kind of lucky at the start of this year, right, to see that that the effort that Maersk and IBM undertook over a year ago now, right, finally kind of came, out of the, out of the shadows, right? And so, you can actually finally point to some, industrial use cases this year. So I think part of the, challenge going forward is that, I've heard of blockchain, working with blockchain to be, building an airplane while flying it. Perhaps it's flying an airplane while building it. But I think that that's certainly true, and we're going to have to sort of live it, right, for the next couple of years to see, which concepts and which POCs actually bear fruit, so to speak. Like we see the sort of the sprouts coming up out of the earth, but they haven't necessarily borne fruit yet. So I'm eager to watch and learn what's actually a success in the coming years.
I think there's so much, obviously everyone here is on the same page that there's so much potential with these technologies, and you could create a lot of value and benefits for the end users by decentralizing these systems. Do you guys feel like the clients or partners or enterprises that you're working with grasp that concept of decentralization, or how do you approach that? Is it kind of a 0 to 100 type of thing where you're pitching the future, or are you able to kind of find ways to ease into it and take steps to get to that point?
Do you want to?
Maybe I'll field that one first. So, I think part of it is that, my reflection would be that, not every project necessarily needs a blockchain. I think that, again, there's still that eagerness to explore, blockchain solutions for a variety of things, but I guess we'll see. What's been your experience?
Something I wanted to add to the education point that I think dovetails nicely into this discussion is that there's almost been too much education in regards to blockchain was the solution to everything. And I think we're in that kind of state right now where too much was promised. Now again, I come from the context of a lot of ICOs just because of the nature of legal work. So ICOs they're obviously going to be overselling their product, et cetera, et cetera. We've created some technology that can do anything, invest in us, et cetera, et cetera. Not that any of our clients are saying that, but you guys take my point. So I think one of the concerns about almost having too much education is that people think that public ledger systems are perfect for anything. And I think a lot of what's happening now is that, well, maybe this doesn't make sense. Maybe you don't need a decentralized piece of software to do, what you're looking to use blockchain for. And in fact, in my experience in the discussion about whether we need a decentralized system, I don't think it ever matters. Now, I've got a very narrow view of the market, so that definitely shouldn't be taken as kind of a characteristic of the market as a whole. But I find that decentralized, maybe semi-decentralized, 8 to 10 adverse actors. The law is very adverse, so it's a unique concept, but I don't think it's ever integral to the work that we're looking at.
I think you sort of touched on the key there is that, you really need to have those multi-stakeholder relationships where, they're sort of frenemies, right? Like they do business together, but there's a lot of business cases in which case, if we were all doing business together, my loss would be your gain and vice versa, right? And I think that another class of problem that, maybe seems kind of, banal on the surface is this idea that, in complex, business interactions that maybe span the globe, right? Maybe there's sort of international jurisdictional issues as well. No, we're not going to touch on regulation too much, but
feel free.
The idea being that sometimes if the alternative being somebody would maintain a database or we would each keep our own sort of version of the truth, right? Is when those things get out of sync, right? Or that if let's say we contracted a big contractor to do it and then maybe they fail or they go out of business or something like that, right? To sort of really leverage those kind of sort of game theoretic cases, if you will, that have value.
I'd say I'd go back to the criteria of defining decentralization. It could be architectural decentralization, that your software is running in different regions geographically. It could be governance decentralization, that whenever you're doing any changes in the solution, whenever you're taking critical decisions, the decision-making process is decentralized. It could mean different to different organizations. And from my experience, what I see is the economy overall is moving towards a more shared economy pattern, like millennials, they prefer renting over buying a home. They prefer ride-hailing apps over buying a car, and Airbnb versus booking a hotel. So that's where the economy is moving today. And even though businesses and enterprises, they are a little skeptical about going completely decentralized, I feel that they still need to have that in their strategic vision, that this is where the economy is going, and we need to, maybe slowly and steadily, but we need to align our business models to where the economy is moving.
Yeah, good points. I think like the big part, the big value out of decentralization, right, is that you have that immutability of the data. No one's able to touch the data. It becomes tamper-proof. I think in a lot of the enterprise consortium blockchains that we're seeing, that could be questionable at this point in time. It's one thing that seems to this year have happened is that IBM seems, or with Hyperledger, they've taken a lot of the projects and are doing a lot of stuff, which means that a lot of the nodes are sitting on IBM servers or on Microsoft servers or on Amazon servers. So do you feel like that, again, inhibits decentralization to some extent?
What is the question?
That we're trying to achieve decentralization, but it seems like we're going back to a centralized model where everything is stored on the same servers.
I wouldn't give the example of Hyperledger here because it is not meant to be a completely public, decentralized solution. It is meant to be a more private consortium sort of a technology. But thinking of Ethereum, which is more public, or Quorum, you can set up your own nodes and you can set up them either in Azure or IBM's cloud or in virtual machines running in your own warehouses, right? So in terms of public, it is public, and it's up to you on how you define your architecture. But yeah, Hyperledger is something I wouldn't want to comment on in terms of decentralization.
Yeah, all I want to add to that is just, it's sort of a shift of thinking in, from distributed systems in the sense that where the computers are located, right? So that there's been distributed systems for a while now, and the shift to thinking about decentralized systems, which really talks about ownership, right? Like who actually controls those computers. So I mean, the cloud point is valid because at the end of the day, those computers are sitting on Microsoft's property or Amazon's property, but they could equally well be shifted to in someone's basement or a data center or whatnot, right? It's really the ownership of that stakeholdership, if you will, in the system.
Yeah, and it's similar to what happened to cloud initially. Everybody was creating their own private clouds, and they were like, we don't trust hosting our data in somebody else's infrastructures. And now where it is? Where are those private cloud companies?
Although, we might be rethinking that kind of in the current, atmosphere. There's been a series of bugs that have been, coming out into the open since the start of this year that, in fact, it's very difficult with current hardware to actually isolate these things. That kind of keeps me up at night a little bit, but, I think that technologically we'll get past these things eventually.
I'm a bit old school. When I started off as a software engineer, it was just before the cloud kind of became mainstream, so everybody had their own servers. That's the technical environment I'm used to. I'm not as much of a fan. I don't want to make this conversation about cloud, but I'm not a fan of cloud as much as the market seems to be. So I always love to see it come back a little. But in regards to your question about control of the nodes, one anecdote that I'd like to give is that I get frustrated when we deal with public ledger vendors that we deal with at Fasken, where no one ever offers us a node. Everybody just gives us software like, yeah, throw it up. And it's like, I'm looking for a complete solution. This is something that there's education value, there's control, et cetera, et cetera. It also shows, I think, a level of complexity that I'd like to see in my software vendor that we actually haven't run into, which is a bit interesting. And it also makes me a bit afraid that too many people are just trying to develop software to throw it up, when in reality, I think that goes against it disrespects the system, if you will. Because inherently, if all your actors are ignoring the decentralized characteristic, which was the key to blockchain, I mean, what are we going to have in 10 years?
Interestingly, you raised kind of an interesting point. I mean, it really speaks to how sort of nascent this technology kind of is in a lot of ways. I mean, now this year we celebrated the 10th anniversary of Bitcoin, right? But that's just one blockchain. Interestingly, Bitcoin this year, someone produced, I think the company's called Casa, and actually produced a node that you can just sort of buy and plug in. And so, I mean, I think these things are coming.
Yeah, yeah. We have been exploring Terraform. So Terraform are these automated scripts to create infrastructure. Like you write it once, and every time you have to onboard a partner onto the network, you just run those scripts and they'll create that infrastructure for you in one go. So.
Awesome. Yeah, and so those are those complete solutions that we're trying to go towards. I think just shifting gears a bit, economic incentives for business leaders to want to invest in blockchain technologies. It seems that a lot of the times these revenue models that they could build or different types of products that they could build around these technologies, if they're doing it right, are drastically different than anything else they're doing now. Often it's tough for folks to even see a good reason to invest in this stuff if they already have business models that are generating good money and stuff. Often this new technology would just sabotage the way they're doing things, right? Do you see things like this in your day-to-day, or do you see cost drivers inhibiting business leaders from investing and going full steam into developing these solutions?
What I have seen is that the enterprises or these companies are very enthusiastic on adopting blockchain and having their business models kind of innovated, but the kind of view that they have is they are removing the third party, they're removing the middleman, they want to be the middleman. And it's so hard to convince them that this is not what it's meant to be, and it's not their fault. They need to see how they can earn revenue. They need to see how, the investment that they're putting in, how are they going to make money out of it. So it's very challenging, and that's what I meant that the blockchain education has moved from blockchain 101 to identifying the right use cases and identifying the right means of the return of investment for these enterprises.
Yeah, I agree. I know that sometimes there's sort of magical thinking around technology. I know I've talked to a few CEOs that thought, we're working with a number of our stakeholders. We'll create a token, and that token will increase in value by 1,000%, right? And then we'll just basically print money. And then you're like, well, why would people kind of value this token, right? I think that fortunately that kind of ICO mentality. I know there's still ICOs going on to your earlier point, Matt, and your point, Mark. But
legal ICOs.
Yes,
that's what we do.
Ones,
we help these companies do things properly.
Yep. Certainly, I think we're realizing that just having a token in the mix doesn't automatically make your product amazing. I think moreover, the average consumer, in being in this space for a while, you start to, it starts to sound like an echo chamber, right? I think the average consumer won't really care whether there's a blockchain behind it or not. What they care about, I think there's still tremendous opportunities though, right? Like again, in the US now there's a report that says don't eat romaine lettuce. Right? So I think there's certainly, a long way we can go, with systems that are currently in practice.
Yeah, and I think one of the economic incentives is that the digital scarcity. So the thing with physical goods is that as long as they're physical, you can ensure that they're unique and you hold the ownership to them. But when you have to put it online, when you have to create a digital copy of it, you can make innumerable copies of it, and it's very difficult to have that sort of digital scarcity with the physical goods. And blockchain, with the help of tokenization, is allowing you to tie your physical asset with the digital token and have the same level of digital scarcity which you would have otherwise with your physical goods. And that is something which is a huge economic incentive for enterprises to try it out, because there are innumerous use cases. I mean, it could be information, it could be actual products, it could be cannabis, it could be blood that you need to tokenize, and you need to see where it is at any given point in time, who has the ownership to it, how much of it is there in each individual's pocket. So that is the kind of, that same time visibility, which they did not have earlier, is a huge economic incentive. And I mentioned the Microsoft royalties project that I'm working on. So the use case there was that they have these Xbox game developers, and Microsoft interacts with multiple partners to kind of purchase these games from them. And every time a transaction is happened for a Xbox at Microsoft portal, these developers need to be paid their royalties. And so for them, the partners would only have a visibility into how much they've earned after 60 to 75 days. So if a transaction happens today, in the middle of the month, let's say today is 7th, they have to wait until the end of the month when the statement would be generated, and then another 30 to 45 days to wait for the reconciliation to happen. And then they would be able to see after almost 60 to 75 days. But by putting that entire thing, all those transactions on blockchain, it is reduced to 4 minutes, which is 95% cycle time reduction. So it's that economic incentive, like talking about economic incentive, this is what it is. Same time visibility, near real time visibility.
I want to talk about 2 points. The first one is kind of where this incentive lies, and it's a bit odd. The alignment of it seems off, where there's a heavy amount of incentive for investors to come in. If you'd like to raise money with a blockchain company, it's probably not going to be that hard. It's definitely a lot easier than other industries. But when we actually look at the products and the value that organizations, corporations can actually save or gain, we're not seeing that parallel. So it's so weird. I mean, from a legal point of view, seeing other sort of transactions, I've never seen it. So everybody just wants to get in, but no one knows what to do once they get in. And I think that's skewing this idea a little about, okay, so how do we actually use this technology and make money? The other point I want to make is concerning smart contracts. So smart contracts, it's still a fairly young area of the blockchain. And I say that with a lot of confidence, even though someone in the room might disagree with me, but there isn't a lot of mature products in this area. You always hear about people doing things, but when you actually drill down to what people are doing, it's some of the stuff is fantastic. I mean, the idea of creating tokens through a smart contract it's just, that person needs economic Nobel Prize, but we're not seeing it take the legs that we thought it would. We're not seeing these products arise. We're not seeing that disruption. And through my experience at Fasken, trying to figure out how we can either get in front of this technology or use this technology to start selling things, and we, in that role, are an organization that's trying to either make money or save money using this technology. I don't have enough people. I don't have enough organizations participating in the market for these opportunities to exist. And I think people are leaving money on the table. You can only do, to kind of give an example, you can only do a couple of things with a smart contract. You can transfer money, you can communicate, even though you probably don't want to because it's not the best medium for it, and you can do internal state changes. Anything else, and I know that's a broad generalization, but bear with me, anything else requires a third party, an oracle, somebody that's performing services to the blockchain that you can then take advantage of to write more sophisticated smart contracts, if you will. We don't see these entities exist. And without, it's a bit chicken egg, but without those entities, then we can't create these incredible products that no one's actually thought of before and really start pushing innovation. So I think there's a lot of money that people are leaving on the table, but everybody's, I guess, a bit hesitant to take that first step, especially, going back to my first point, where all the money is already there and there's no kind of pressure, especially from the startup point of view, to do something with that money.
Great. Do you guys have any examples on the flip side of being able to solve these issues and actually work with your partners to come up with proper revenue models and convince them that this was a good idea and this is how you would be able to monetize? Is this?
So interestingly, it was mentioned earlier that I work with the blockchain lab at the Schulich School of Business. And, we're starting to see now a trickle, but I'm thinking it's soon going to be like a fire hose of ICOs that went off like last year. And if you follow crypto, you know that their treasuries must be down by like 90-some%. And now it's late. It's time to deliver some stuff, and then they're coming to us and saying, I don't want to single any folks out, but what's our token model? Like, how's this economy going to work? How is this digital economy going to work that we're creating? Sometimes we're figuring it out. It would be my answer.
Anyone else want to jump in there?
We've had a lot of success with, I'll in quote success, but we've had a lot of movement that is towards success with building consortiums. And I know this is one of your further points that you want to raise. And to actually build on one of Merrick's earlier points of getting frenemies together and really developing your own ecosystem. That seems to be the way that we've best found a solution, again in quotes, almost there, but getting a lot further than we have on our own. And it's to try and bring together all parties that would benefit, which is actually really easy to do with the system. That's one of the beauties of the system. It's not simply, I gain, you lose, everybody else just uses. You can actually build systems where everybody gains either some efficiency or some new revenue stream. So our greatest success has been bringing kind of that entire supply chain together, and yeah.
It has been like for us, it has been difficult to explain the economic gain, like a direct economic gain or a direct return on investment. But in terms of cutting down on operational cost by automating stuff, by improving the example that I gave, reducing the cycle time by 95%. Now you have real-time visibility into which products are being sold, so you know where your marketing effort is going, whether it is effective or not. If it is not, you can cut down that cost, right? So a lot of those things. In case when there was no blockchain in this particular network, these companies would go out and hire audit firms to come and audit their records, because these are different entities and they do not share the same ledger. They have their own ledgers, and every year they need to spend a huge amount of money on these audits. You don't need to do that anymore. Reconciliations, you don't need to do that anymore. So those are the indirect benefits, and that is where you will see the return on investment, which you might not have a hard number right now, but eventually you will reap the gains of it in future.
Are you finding it easier to move to your next project based on the success of your previous projects? Are you finding it easier to kind of move to that next project, to get buy-in for that next project?
Yes.
Based on your previous ones? I mean, that's exciting to hear, because I think it goes back to that slide kind of showing where we're in adoption. But that's really what we need. We really need people to see how, we've actually saved a ton of money in this area. Let's see if we can use that solution in this other area and kind of build from there. Merrick?
Yeah,
is that your experience?
so my experience, a lot of it has been kind of in the more startup space. I think it's not my observations. I actually don't know who to attribute it to, but I read it somewhere on Twitter. This idea that new technological innovations really empower the small guy, right? Like the barbarians at the gates, right? The individual developers. And what's true is it really has opened up new revenue streams for sort of the next generation of Steve Jobs's and Bill Gates. And I don't think that we're going to see the full impact of that for maybe another 10 years or so.